Before we jump into today's episode, we want to take a moment to thank our Beefmaster Banter sponsors for the month of February. Thank you to G&N Cattle Company and Lewis Farms Beefmasters. Your support helps make these conversations possible and allows us to share timely, relevant information with cattlemen across the country. We truly appreciate your continued investment in the Beefmaster breed and in this podcast. Thank you for being part of the Beefmaster Banter.
Hello and welcome to the Beefmaster Banner. I'm your host, Lance Bauer. Today we're joined by Mr. Lorenzo Lasseter, and we're looking forward to talking today about the history of the breed and where the breed's going. Lorenzo, how are you doing?
Doing great. Good to be here with you and the Beefmaster family.
So to get started today, let's just talk a little bit about the history of the breed and how your family developed it and what it was originally developed for.
Okay, well, I'll briefly go back to the beginning because part of the story. My great-great-grandfather settled in South Texas in the mid-ish, 1860s. And so he was the first member of our family to raise cattle in Texas. And then my great-grandfather, around Falfurrias and in Brooks County in South Texas, he ended up amassing about 400,000 acres and putting together the original herds that went into the Beefmaster breeding, experimenting with crossbreeding. So during that time, he founded the town of Falfurrias in the county of Brooks, and again had a large holding. He was neighbors with the King Ranch in that area down there. And in fact, when he went broke, the King Ranch ended up with a lot of the land, which is our almost got rich story. But he had amassed about 20,000 Hereford cows, which is the cow of choice, or kind of the only choice at that time in Texas. And he began experimenting in, I think it was 1887 and 1888, somewhere in there. It was the first importation of Bos Indicus bulls with the Shanghai Pierce estate. And he started using those bulls, breeding them to Herefords to fix what didn't work with the Herefords in South Texas: bad eyes, bad feet, couldn't take the heat, the usual things you're familiar with. And it's important to note that those cattle he was using, we call them Brahman today because it's a generic word for Bos Indicus cattle, but they were actually Gyr and Guzeret from India and Nellore from Brazil. So those are kind of the three component breeds that went into the 50% of the Bos Indicus mix in Beefmasters that we think of today. So he fell prey to a lot of debt in the 1930s and 1920s during the Great Depression, lost most of the land. And my grandfather, Tom Lasseter, was at Princeton at the time, and my great-grandfather died early in 1930. So my grandfather, Tom, came home from Princeton to kind of hold together what was left of the family ranch, which wasn't much at this time. And so he was familiar through his upbringing with the experimentation with crossbreeding. And really the breed project started out, he was just continuing on that. They really liked the Brayfords, they called them, the Brahman Hereford, the Bos Indicus Hereford crosses. And in the 1930s, early in the 1930s, he introduced a third herd in Shorthorn. And it was actually in the form of three bulls. He only used three Shorthorn bulls, two horned, one polled. And he began crossing, and when he stumbled on the three-way cross, which would be a Brahman Hereford bred to a Brahman Shorthorn, he realized that three-way cross, which was what would later become the Beefmaster, was much better than anything he'd seen before, any of the two-way crosses. And that holds true today. That's what makes a Beefmaster better than a Brangus, better than a Sanguijutus, better than a Brayford, is that three-way cross is maximum heterosis. And the 50-50 balance of Bos Indicus and Bos Taurus, I think, makes us kind of stand apart in the world of hybrid bigger. Now, there's the bulls that can bring something uniquely different, but still yet balancing with the more common English cattle. So he closed his herd in 1937. So he did that original crossing, closed his herd. All the original cattle that I mentioned were completely gone by, I think, 1942, but no new genetics was brought in after 1937. And so we view the genesis of the breed as there at 1937. So next year will be 90 years since the breed was founded by our calculation. So then he set about improving those cattle that he had. And through that process came our guiding philosophy, the 6 essentials. And he developed that. I think it started as the 5 essentials, and he added a 6th somewhere along the way. But that kind of became the method by which he developed the breed over those many years as it went along. And that's one of the things that makes Beefmasters truly unique, is they're the the only breed that I know of that was developed purely for economic considerations, which is what the six essentials are. Most breeds develop out of an aesthetic for color, type, or size, or purpose, like draft animals, whatever it is. But Beefmasters were raised purely for economic reasons as it relates to the beef industry. So that kind of makes them unique. So just touching, kind of rounding out the timeline, he named them Beefmasters in 1945. The breed was recognized by the USDA in 1954. I think Beefmaster Breeders Universal was founded by my grandparents and named by my grandmother in maybe 1964. And then, kind of goes through the history to the modern times.
And Lorenzo, it is really interesting with the six essentials that, it was founded on an economic basis, not like you said, like other breeds that were founded for, a purpose such as draft or just yard art. So that is a really interesting part of our history. And it's something that I think that we can hold on to a little bit today. And when we make our selection decisions, and we've seen it held on to, which is a really neat thing. Can you touch on those six essentials and kind of where you see them and how you see them used today?
Yeah, well, so the six essentials, just to give you the list, are fertility, weight, conformation, hardiness, milk production, and disposition. And my grandfather's idea that you select for those six things in balance, and that will give you productive, economically efficient cattle and profitable cattle. And his idea was always about balance, and it's amazing how that balance has come back into vogue in the modern industry. But again, the idea was if you put too much emphasis on one of those, it would hurt one of the others, and that's exactly how we know it goes in real life. If you put too much emphasis on a single trait selection, there's a cost to be paid somewhere else in the production chain. And so, his idea was always about balance. And it's kind of incredible, his ideas are coming out of the 1940s, let's say. And my dad wrote the book about his ideas in the 1960s. And we still sell probably 20 or 30 of those books a month. So it's incredible to me that everybody who wasn't interested in the idea of the six essentials hadn't already got the book. But that people still keep coming to them. And in the modern era, with such an emphasis on single trait selection with the Angus run towards all carcass, towards basically a terminal cross carcass animal, a lot of people are looking for a better way. So all these buzzwords now, regeneration and sustainability and all that, kind of falls right in Beefmaster's wheelhouse. And so people, whether or not they're applying to Beefmasters, and I wish they would buy Beefmasters to apply them to, they realize they can take those ideas and apply them to whatever breed of cattle or whatever breed of livestock for that matter, that suits them. And so it's typically a certain type of person that's drawn to the idea, a certain type of rancher who is interested in more grass-based, more regenerative, more grazing oriented, and who's drawn to the ideas, but they still hold strong, which is amazing to me. And I guess to round out my answer to your question, my disappointment with all that would be is I don't think we as a breed honor that enough. It's in our mission statement and everything, but we really don't. I don't think enough of us follow it in any kind of meaningful way. We kind of pay it lip service. So I would love to see people kind of embrace the ideas, because if you'll just apply them to your cow herd, the results will be fantastic. It's such a simple but tried and true production method and philosophy.
I think you're right there. And I guess we've talked a little bit about it. There were some other breeds around the the world that were all kind of developed at the same time. And I think that your family was in touch with those breeds out of South Africa, and the Bonsmara breed and the Drought Master. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah. So, of course, the American breeds were all developed at a similar time. To answer that piece, in fact, the Armstrongs, the Santa Gertrudis, and my grandfather were neighbors, and so they used to drink whiskey and talk and argue about the finer points of producing a breed. But those other breeds came later. My grandfather later in his career was always on a speaking circuit for agriculture meetings, and he became good friends with John Bonsma, who patterned his breed after the ideas of Beefmasters, but using a 5/8, 3/8, more like a Santa Gertrudis. And then Drought Master came even later. I want to say that the guy, and we met his son, Lance, when we were in Australia, but his grandfather came and visited my grandfather in like the, I don't know, 1950s, and basically took the idea for how he created Beefmasters and the ideas behind them, and that's where Draftmaster came from. And they are a three-way cross using, they're not the same breeds used, but similar, which is, I think, probably why they're also similar looking cattle.
Yes. You've been around it your entire life. Where, what changes are you seeing in a positive? I know you touched on that you'd like to see us incorporate some more of the 6 essentials, but in a positive direction, what changes are you seeing with the breed that you think are good? What are some that you think might not be so good?
Well, I could answer that a number of different ways. I think one of the things I'm most proud about in the modern era of Beefmasters is the growth of the international footprint. In other words, we were just a Texas-centric and central United States breed for many decades. And under my father started exporting the first genetics to South Africa in the 1970s, and it kind of, Mexico, he ranched in Mexico for 10 years. I was born down there, and that had an impact. I think Beefmasters are the largest beef registry in Mexico now. So seeing that growth, and I think there's associations probably in 12 or 15 different countries now. And to get an association, you obviously have to have enough members with enough cattle to want to form an association. So I really think the growth of the breed internationally and the respect it's getting in a lot of unexpected markets, like right now it's growing like crazy in Europe, which I never would have thought. But they're having a lot of the same problems we are here with a basically terminal cow herd, and how do you get back more maternal ability, more grazing ability, these kinds of things, which a lot of industries worldwide have abandoned, in the modern era, let's say over the last 30 years. My biggest disappointment, if I'm speaking honestly, is probably the lack of respect that our breed gets in the United States. We are not taken seriously enough, and it's partly our own fault. But, it's heartbreaking to me that cattle that I know are this good and should serve such a large role in the U.S. cattle industry are often, people won't try them. They've heard about them and don't want to try, and all these kinds of things. And that part for me, and I know other breeders, is pretty painful. When you meet somebody on a plane and they're like, "What do you do?" "I raise Beefmasters." And they're like, "Oh, what's that?" And, I want to slap them and say, "Well, it's the 9th largest breed in the U.S. You should know," but they just don't. And again, I don't know whether we haven't told our story very well, or whether historically we blew some opportunities. But anyway, I'm hopeful that we need to change that. This is a great time, greatest time in our lifetime, anyone's lifetime, to be in the cattle industry. And there's a real opportunity in front of us. And we need to be bold and seize our piece of that pie, because there's no better cow for the Beefmaster female. You can like whatever breed you want, breed those cows to whatever type of bull you want, get involved in whatever programs you want, but there is no better base cow for grass-based calf raising in the United States. And I view the United States as a little bit striated north and south. As you go north, it gets a lot more, kind of farmer feeders, more grain-fed, bigger cows, barns in the winter, that kind of thing. But when you anywhere in the southern United States, and that extends probably north in the west, it's raising calves on grass, and often in extensive country, and that's where Beefmasters really shine. Like, that's where people need them, should want them, but don't often enough. But I've definitely seen the demand curve change, and I guess that would be the most positive thing I see now. And I don't know if it's just this fantastic market is raising everyone's boats, or there's a thirst out there, and this is what I hope and think it is, for something different, for a little better way than what we've been doing, in recent years.
You mentioned, and we talked about it, the drive for terminal and other breeds, and then you mentioned Beefmaster being the maternal breed, and I think we've got some really neat research that came out. You touched on it. BBU's put it out as an infographic. What are your thoughts on that USDA heterosis paper that was recently published?
I think it was spectacular. I viewed it as a gift from the gods. When I started reading it, I couldn't believe that the USDA put it out, because it was so favorable to Beefmasters, and they didn't intend it to be that way. In other words, it was 18 breeds, tens of thousands of calves. They were just trying to study efficiency through the major breeds that are used in the U.S. beef complex. But what rose to the top immediately is Beefmasters was like number 1 or 2 in every category that they had studied. Well, that's pretty remarkable, right? And nobody's, we're all trying to talk about it as we promote our own deals and the breeds message. But I thought that was really spectacular news coming from an organization that, it wasn't like we paid them to do a study or anything like that. They kind of at arm's length secured genetics and tested them in their own way, and that they absolutely rung the bell in a lot of different categories, from carcass to carcass weights to feeding efficiency, all these different areas that they're looking at. So I think it's really exciting news, and I'd like to see more attention paid to it industry-wide.
I agree. And what struck me there was the highest average breed heterosis of any breed. And it's one thing that, me studying genetics, the heterosis factor and being a three-way cross rather than the traditional 3/8 5/8 cross has always kind of intrigued me. Uh, do you know any more on the history of why your grandfather and great grandfather, why they did three, or I guess your grandfather did the three-way, but why did he go with three-way instead of the two-way like everybody else?
So it was actually kind of by accident. So he didn't have any money to buy bulls, and that's where these three shorthorn bulls came into the mix. But when he introduced that three-way cross, so he was doing what they all were then, which is a 5/8 3/8. And so he sort of accidentally stumbled on this, and I remember him describing it in writings. And as I was a child, it was like somebody had turned the lights on. He'd already saw, like, you could just immediately see that those three-way crosses were so much better than the two-way crosses. So, one, you balance out the Bos Indicus, Bos Taurus, I think, a little bit. And another thing I believe that sets us apart from some of our American competitors is that the herd was closed in 1937, and not that all the cattle Beefmasters are descended by the herd from any stretch. I mean, that's the idea in theory, but obviously it didn't work out that way. But I think that balanced selection for the six essentials since that time has resulted in a very different breed. Where some of our competitors now have ultra blacks, or they're recreating F1s and kind of starting over. We've never reinvented the wheel. We've just kept moving forward, selecting on that gene pool that was originally given to us 90 years ago. And so I think I tell people, and this may or may not be wrong genetically, but I tell people we're a homozygous beef breed. 90 years later, like God didn't create the Angus, it evolved out of circumstances at the time that it came into being. And I think the same has happened in Beefmasters. I think we're now a homozygous beef breed, but with the built-in power, hybrid vigor power of a hybrid. But so like a stabilized hybrid would be a good way to put it, to coin a competitor's phrase. And I really think that's what makes the cattle so strong in crossbreeding, is you get that big punch of heterosis, but in a more uniform, predictable package.
I agree. And I think the uniform and predictable, I think we've gotten more and more in that direction recently. Selecting for that. We sat at NCBA together for a good part of last week. One thing I noticed there, and you talked about it a little bit, is a little bit of resurgence in the breed and a little bit more interest. And I felt, in my opinion, that this was one of the strongest showings we've had at NCBA as a breed, with the most true interest in the breed from people passing by. Is that the thoughts you got?
Yeah, I certainly at NCBA, but it stretches to anywhere that I interact with people. Ranchers a lot of them are looking for a better way. They've been kind of sold a bill of goods over the last 20 years. It's worked out in some ways and not in others. And if people are making their living raising calves on grass, they're trying to figure out a way to do this a little better. And you can say it's because inputs are so high. You can say it's because of global warming. There's a whole lot of factors that go into why somebody would want to do a better job. But there is interest. A great example, you said it, just standing there at a little booth like we do at all these trade shows, and nobody comes by. You hand out a few brochures, not much happens. Well, there were people actually seeking us out and asking good questions. And that felt like a switch to me, a change, an improvement. Because I think if we can tell the story and back it up, we've got to back it up, which is the key to the mission. But if we can tell the story properly and back it up, I think there's a real opportunity for us to increase our commercial bull market, which will increase all the other phases of the breed. I said it earlier in a different context, but a rising tide lifts all boats. If we can just take another 1 or 2% of the commercial bull market from whoever we have to take that from, it's going to make everybody's job selling whatever they're selling easier and better. And again, the name recognition thing, if Beefmasters were a household word like Angus is or Hereford is, I think it would be a lot easier to sell. Like, we have this first hump to always overcome. It's like, well, what is a Beefmaster? So you got to go through this whole thing. And, I'm hoping that soon we will get 90 years later, we will get to the point where we're past that discussion and people are like, well, why should I use Beefmasters over the competing breeds? Because that's a much easier question to answer quickly.
I agree. So we've talked about the past. And I know I asked you if Bo was going to be on. So let's talk a little bit about the future. I know that you've brought Bo back, and Bo's involved in the operations, so that puts him what generation, and kind of where do you see y'all going?
Well, he's the sixth generation, and it's been one of the thrills of my career to have him come home and go to work with us. When both my kids got out of college, they both went to TCU. They both got good jobs right out of college, making double what I could pay them at the ranch. And so, I always just kind of figured that, that was going to be the end of it. Either a grandkid was going to have to come along or it would just, die of its own. And one year at Thanksgiving, they pulled me on the side and they said, "What's your succession plan?" I said, "Well, I don't really have one. You guys both have good jobs. I can't pay you what you're making. I don't really see a way out. So, we'll just write it as best we can." Well, his wife graduated from PT school. Her family's here. Like, things just kind of aligned. Like, I really, really think God had a little something to do with it. But we were able to give him a job in both of our firms. She was able to get a good job. We could just make it all work. Where now that the sixth generation in his place, he's got two kids. So the seventh generation is on the ground. Who knows what they will choose to do. But I'd love to see the family experiment continue, because you can't really start that over. It's pretty hard to get to the sixth generation. So I'm hopeful that we can keep it together.
That's awesome, and it's been awesome seeing Bo come on board with
Yeah,
BBU stuff and get more involved there.
It's been a ton of fun for me too, and his mother.
Now we don't have his mother to keep you and Bo in line now, because it's just you two coming to events. But
that's exactly what she said when we got back from NCBA. We were both tired, and she's like, "See, if you don't have me there to make you go to bed early, you guys stay out too late." Like, yeah.
No, is there anything else you'd like to add to what we're talking about today, Lorenzo?
Well, you mentioned at the beginning, we didn't really talk about it, but the strategic planning session that we just had, and I congratulate you and Trey and the executive committee on doing that. I think that's a really valuable exercise to kind of come together and sort of talk about what our threats, opportunities are. And we have plenty of both. We've got some significant threats we need to address. But again, the opportunity in this crazy market and the cow rebuilding is going to have to come. I mean, we're the cow that they ought to be looking for. How do we produce enough of them that are good enough to fill that gap and solidify our place in the U.S. beef industry? So I hope that we can really dive into that process like in a unified manner. I mean, I know, like we were talking about commercial bulls, and I know not everybody listening to this agrees that we should spend any time on commercial bulls. But if you look at what our competition, if you look at the success of the Angus, they did not register 300,000 calves last year because they're showing cattle, or they're doing this or they're doing that. They focus on the commercial cattle industry, the commercial bull market, and everything else falls into place because they are the go-to name brand, blah, blah, blah. And, certified Angus beef paid a role. There's a lot of complexity that happened in their story over the last 30 years. But I really think that if we can focus on that message and truly carry it out, like we pay lip service to the idea of commercial bull sales for the 30 some years I've been doing BBU stuff. We really need to take that seriously and like focus all of our efforts in a unified manner on achieving that. And the challenge always is if you ask 5 Beefmaster breeders what they think we ought to do, you get 5 different answers, right? There's no, and that includes 2 breeding programs and everything else. But our competition, not all of them, but the ones that are truly successful have been really good at unifying around a message and then letting people multiply the genetics that fit that message and operating in a structured business-like manner. And I think we have that opportunity before us. I hope our leadership and you and staff can kind of carry that forward. But this is the best time ever to be in the cattle business, and we need to capitalize on that.
Well, I agree, and I think that's something you mentioned with the commercial cattle industry that's always been something I've thought of, and I may not have put it out there the best, but selling these high dollar bulls and high dollar females is really, really fun. It looks cool, but what we're here to do is progress the commercial industry and provide them with a product that makes progress for them. We've got that product. We need to rally around it, and we need to push forward with it, and show them that we've got the best, that we can make them the best mama cow that they've ever seen, and still allow them to do everything else they've been doing.
Absolutely. So the thing I would I would encourage everybody to keep in mind, like I know there's this seed stock commercial thing that we talk about, but if you're going to sell 75 or more bulls, let's say a significant sized bull sale, you might sell 10 to 20 of those to registered breeders. The rest have to go to someone else. So in order to sell a large number of bulls a year, you have to have a commercial bull market. And whether that's you selling to your neighbors in your area, or you have an annual bull sale, or you go to consignment, however you do it, some of those are going to go to commercial people at more commercial prices. So it's the only way to get any numbers sold. And one of our challenges, we talked about it at the deal. You had that graph that Beef Magazine's deal, which we have 1% or something in the commercial bull market. I mean, it's actually embarrassing. And so how do you move that to 2%? Like, I feel sometimes like we're selling all that we can. And again, so that's that demand cycle. If we push the numbers up, we grow more demand. And again, that benefits everybody if we can play it right. The next challenge, if the breed does grow in popularity, which I think it will continue to do, we got to keep the quality up. So that doesn't mean everybody just sells whatever they can raise. That's one of the things that went wrong for the breed in the 70s is it grew too fast, and a lot of poor quality Beefmasters were sold. And I'm sure you run into people all the time. They're like, my granddaddy used those bulls, slab-sided, sloppy, blah, blah, blah. And I tell people, I was like, these are not your granddaddy's Beefmasters. We've transformed these cattle. These are modern, efficient cattle that check all the boxes, not just a few of the boxes. Check all the boxes.
I agree. I think we've done a really good job of pushing that and pushing for cattle that check all the boxes and stay functional and stay maternal. So, Lorenzo, thank you for your time today. And
You bet.
if you got any closing comments, let us know. And
well, I probably have a lot, but without a prompt of a question, I probably can't think of one. But I appreciate you making time for this. I love talking about the history, and I encourage people to learn more about it. We have a unique spot in the breed that we're outside of the King Ranch. We're the only breed in the U.S. that the founding family is still involved. And that's a pretty unique story. And we're one of the first of the American breeds, one of the largest of the American breeds. I think these are things that we should really be proud of. And I really think the next decade is going to be the era of the American breeds. We just need to be sure it's the era of Beefmaster first and those other guys second. But I think we're going to we the American breeds are finally going to come into our own for the important role we had to play in kind of getting this cow herd stabilized back to a grass-based production.
I agree. Well, Lorenzo, thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone for listening today. And we'll get back with you next month and have another episode of the Beefmaster Banner.
Great to be with everyone.
And finally, thank you to the listeners who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and we're so excited to continue to bring you great content from the Beefmaster breed. Please know that we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search Beefmaster Banter. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.